Welcome. You're watching Rugby with Rifle, a podcast about all things rugby and life, with your host, Danny Pabone and Rifle Scudder.
And I'm willing to bet there's more people like me that when we played sports, it was about teamwork. It was our camaraderie. It was about the sportsmanship, the games, the lessons of life. So if rugby can bring that back to the U.S. at that professional level, and we get athletes who, as Rifle told me when I started watching the sport, that on the field, they're very intense competitors. But after the game, can go to the bar and have a beer together and talk about, hey, what a good game you played. And actually seeing in some of the documentaries we've seen that one team complimenting one team complimenting the other team's player. They show them on the field going at each other, and then afterwards they say, "Man, that was a good hit." If we can bring that attitude back to sports in America, maybe, and we will succeed. It gives a path to another sport, and maybe it will bleed off into the rest of the population that we can work together, not against each other. We don't have to trash talk. We can be gentlemen and ladies. And for all those reasons, I think the sport of rugby in the US won't be so much about big contracts as it will be about being a part of something big. And then the last thing that is key that you may not see on the front end, but because Kevin and I are investors, you can watch Kevin as I say this. One of the things that I heard them say was that they really wanted, if somebody played the sport of rugby, that they should have an avenue to some raise to the ranks and somehow be an owner of a team one day if they wanted to. And when I heard that, I said, I don't think so. I mean, that sounds good. It's a nice soundbite. But after hanging out with these guys, they really mean that. To the point that Kevin and we are owners. We're part owners of the National Rugby Football League. And it's not, and that's why I want to show you the picture. It wasn't an owner like, okay, yeah, we got a check mark because we got a black guy and a white guy and they're, they're from Atlanta, check the box. No, when they came through Atlanta, they let us know they're coming and we had dinner with them as owners talking to the founder CEO with our families.
Yeah.
So I will say, as somebody gets into the sport as an athlete, they may not be just for the big dollars. It's going to be nice dollars, but the idea to have a path to ownership will be a very attractive force. And I think that message, if we can get it out, is also a very attractive force. I mean, the guys that stood up in the penthouse really care about the guys on the field. And it's the guys on the field saying, yes. How do you know? Well, we went to dinner with them. Is that so? So, Ralph, I hope it's saying, is there potential for this thing to grow? Yes. But before it to grow, it's got to take root. And what you guys do with your podcast are helping it take root. And Kevin, I just thought of one other thing, because looking at Rifle here, I bet if I asked Rifle, would you rather watch the Springboks or the Green Bay Packers? Who would you pick?
Oh, good. I'm not even going to answer that, Earl.
That's insulting.
Springboks.
Well, exactly.
But this is green and gold. These are the Springbok colors.
Okay, it was just but what I'm saying is that proves my point. There's enough folks from other nations in the US, given the choice of watching a rugby match or watching a professional American sport, they're going to watch rugby.
Most certainly.
And so if no Americans at all participated, we still fill the stadiums with everyone else who's been dying to get their sport played on this continent. So there's multiple ways that this is going to work, but it's like planting something. If we don't get the roots deep enough, it's got to take root. And that's where you guys are doing amazingly well. We're doing the best we can, but the more we get the root planted, then when it starts growing, I think it will replace everything else.
That's wonderful. I just want to clarify one thing you said, Earl. You said we have amazing athletes at college level, but they just didn't make it. So then they can go play rugby. Are you saying these guys didn't make the NFL? They don't go to the league and then they can come?
Is
Is that what you meant?
Yeah, that's what I meant. That every year we have guys that are trying out for the professional sports. It could be basketball, it could be football, it could be basketball. They're athletes at the top of their game,
Okay.
and they're good enough to play pro, but they don't get selected. There's another level that are good enough to get selected. They go to the camps and they're just getting ready to get signed, and then they say, "Nope, you didn't make the final cut." And
Yeah.
now they got that close.
Yeah. Okay.
Thousands.
There are thousands of them. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and you got kids in high school. I mean, you got the talent pool is tremendous, and I just believe somebody almost made it and got rejected.
You
Probably
want to
has
stick it to someone.
somebody.
Yeah.
So, but in rugby, you can hit somebody as hard as you can, and then get up and shake hands later on.
Yes, you can.
I
And
just read. I'm always studying this stuff and getting updates on articles and things that are written about the league in general, just the sport. And I saw that the World Rugby Association just came back and said the United States has the third largest talent pool in the world for rugby.
Wow.
I thought about that. I thought, wait a second, we don't even have really a pro level league. And yet our talent pool is a third largest in the world for this sport. I mean, that was, I had to look it up. I had to go to the source and read it again from the source. I was like, this is amazing.
Who was 1 and 2, by the way?
It didn't say actually. It was all
Okay.
about the US and the possibility of rugby in the US. So they didn't list the other two. They were listing stats about the US.
Okay.
So good question though.
And just to piggyback on everything you guys have just mentioned, when we first started this podcast, and I just started researching the numbers on rugby in America, and I looked at different websites and everything, and every website you had saying there's anywhere between 45 to 55 million people in America who either play or follow the game of rugby. And I just thought to myself, wow, I never would have thought 55 million people. I would have never guessed that number. If before starting this podcast, if you had asked me how many people follow rugby, I'd be like, maybe about 15, 20, maybe 25 million. But it really did shock me to see that large of a number of people that actually either follow or play the game of rugby. So
You
there is
know,
a lot of potential there.
yeah. Well, it's something else I noticed that I also was encouraged by. A third of those that are fans are women. So like 34, 35%. So women love the sport of rugby. And not to mention the US and Canadian women's teams won silver and gold or silver and bronze at the Olympics. So
Olympics, yeah.
growing huge with women, but also like 55%, I believe, are millennial. So it's the younger generations also, not just the international folks coming in, but the up and coming kids that are really excited about rugby and make up over half of the fan base.
When
Let
Danny
me-
was staying at my place maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, my son did a rugby camp. The rugby season started. He plays rugby. And there was a whole group of girls, young girls. Maybe they were like under 12 to 18. A whole girls team practicing, and they had coaches and doing everything the guys are doing exactly the same. So you got your young kids coming from high school through high school, girls playing, and then obviously all the guys as well. So that was very, very encouraging to see.
Well, and it's carrying over to the women's interest as investors as well. Almost half of our partnership is women owners. I mean, it's just amazing. So I think there almost may be as much potential, if not more, on the women's side of rugby as there is in men's. It's fantastic. So
Wonderful.
Let me piggyback so really quick. I talked about technology a second ago, and we were talking about this podcast, which is pretty cool. Danny, where are you physically sitting right now?
New Jersey.
Okay, I'm sitting in Alexandria, Louisiana. Kevin, where are you sitting?
just north of Atlanta, Georgia.
And Rifle, where are you sitting?
City of Richmond, Virginia.
Okay, so I live in Peachtree City, Georgia. Rifle was down visiting a while back. He went to a restaurant called Shrimp and Grits, or Georgia Shrimp. Tell us about that experience, Rifle, about shrimp, going to the Georgia Shrimp Company, what you found when you went there.
Staying at Earl's place, people just make supper and go for supper by themselves. So Earl's wife Nancy said, "Let's go for supper quick." I said, "Sure." I haven't eaten anything today, busy with the conference. So she said, "There's a shrimp place just literally 2 minutes from our house." So I'm thinking shrimp. Okay, I'm not that crazy about shrimp, but I'll go get something to eat. And we go to this place and walk into this restaurant, and they have Springbok paraphernalia on the wall. They have pictures of the 1995 World Cup with Madiba, Nelson Mandela, and Francois Pienaar, the captain, holding the World Cup. They have a Springbok on the wall. If you go into the bathroom, there's a Springbok sitting on the toilet reading a newspaper. They had pictures. I mean, it was just phenomenal. So as I'm watching and looking at these pictures, just astounded, the waitress comes and she says, "Oh, do you like rugby?" So I said, "Oh my goodness, do I like rugby? You have no idea." So she said, "Oh, your accent, you're not from here." She said, "You're also from South Africa." I said, "Yeah, I am." So she said, "Our owner, our boss is from South Africa. This is all his stuff from South Africa that he brought. His wife's Irish, he's South African, and they showed the Springboks playing on that Saturday." So I had to slip, I'm sorry, Earl, I had to slip out of the conference and pretend I had to go do something. And I went to secretly watch rugby. And by the time I got there, it was full. There were maybe 30, 35 people with Springbok rugby jerseys and T-shirts before the place even opened. They were standing outside waiting for the doors to open, and we went in and we watched rugby. And I'm in contact with some of those people still now since that day. So that's what rugby did for me in Georgia.
And that's a little town, what, 30, 40 miles south of southern Atlanta?
Yes.
I mean, way out in the central Georgia. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's out in the
come
country.
across that.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it was wonderful.
Wow.
So I know if it can take hold in my hometown out in the middle of the country,
Yeah.
the future looks very, very bright for rugby in the United States.
Good. Happy to hear that.
So one of the things now that Rifle had mentioned a few weeks back, I went to go visit him, stay at his house, and we, like Rifle just mentioned, we went to a clinic, a rugby clinic, and the thing that really caught my eye at one point in the clinic, the coach who was running the clinic was teaching the kids, okay, to stand in a straight line or somewhat, actually, it was like a V, actually, now that I remember, and be behind the player that's carrying the ball. And he kept yelling, not yelling in a bad way, but yelling at the kids, stay together, stay together, stay together. And that really caught my eye because, we're talking about investment, we're talking about, the National Rugby Football League and all the great things to come. But really, in order to accomplish something such as this or any investment, you really need a team and you really need people to stick with you and to move forward with you. And that's a great lesson between rugby and life is in the game of rugby. For example, in the game in the NFL, I'm a huge fan of the NFL. I'm actually, I believe you're an Oakland Raider fan, or you were Oakland Raider fan,
Yeah.
Kevin. So
Outside of
I'm an Oakland Raider fan as well. Well, actually,
Las
it's Las Vegas. Forgive me.
Vegas now.
I still call them Oakland. It's Las Vegas Raiders now. But in the NFL, you have the quarterback or the wide receivers, the star player of the team. They're the ones wanting the most money, or if they don't get the ball enough, they'll start throwing a hissy fit or whatever. But
True.
it's so different in rugby. Rugby is it's a team, it's truly a team sport. And when that coach was kept yelling, stay together, keep up with your teammates, stay together. That really caught my eye, and I just thought about that. That's just investment. That's when you're going after something, such a big vision, such as the National Rugby Football League. If you don't have people that stick with you and you stick together with your core team or with your investors, and as Earl just mentioned, wanting the players to eventually have ownership in the league, if that's not sticking together, I mean, that's just an amazing thing. The foresight and the vision that Michael, who is the commissioner of the league, has, that's truly sticking together as a team and moving forward.
Yep. Absolutely.
Then another question that I have seen that I've already said, my son plays rugby. How do you guys see any change for my son? Because there are 2 or 3 rugby clubs where I am in Richmond, and he plays for the one. How do you think, or what are the plans of the commissioner and guys of changing rugby that it will actually impact, this is a very selfish question, my 13-year-old son's life? How can rugby actually do something for him that for a lot of players, especially where I come from in South Africa, it's the ticket out. There's nothing else that they can do, but you can play rugby. You can play for a club team, or you can play national if you're good enough. You can play for the Springboks. That's your ticket out of poverty, out of crime, out of drugs, out of gangs. Not that my son has to deal with that here, but it could still be, maybe a university that he can go to on a rugby scholarship. Or how do you see rugby changing the life for youngsters at 13 or 14 now, so that when the Rugby World Cup is here in 2031, these youngsters might be playing in the team right there? Does that make sense, a question?
Yeah.
It does. Kevin, you want to take a shot?
Yeah, I'll try and hit this one more kind of bulletized. But leading into that, one of the things when I was studying it, I studied it from the overall fan base, from men and women, and from youth. And when I got to the youth and digging into the youth, something I didn't realize, but youth signing up and getting involved in football, hugely on the decline. I don't know if it's because of the injuries and the damage that's done to so many of them. Very few of them, are able to play through an entire career. But both football and, oddly enough, soccer wasn't doing so well, which has been on a huge upswing in the U.S. for decades. But it also wasn't, and for those not in the U.S., it would be football. But it's both of those I was very surprised to see. So where are these youth going? Back to your point about it being a tremendous opportunity for kids at risk, right? To allow them an avenue to go after that gets them out of the mess, gets them a path forward. And as I started looking into it, realizing what both of you were saying, that it breeds that team environment. It gives them almost a family that surrounds them and helps keep them focused, right? Somewhere to go every day after school. And you don't want to let your teammates down. You don't want to let your family down. But it also gives them a path. It gives them a plan that if they just aren't in a place to believe in themselves from an intellect standpoint, but they have some physical skills, then they can go right now play for I'm not sure if they're the county or the city who puts on some of the local leagues, but if you go on to college, you can play in college, and there's like 900 US colleges that have rugby teams, I believe. That's far more than I expected. I had no clue there were 900 universities with rugby teams. So it's already giving them a place to go and a way to get an education, which is fantastic. And a league like the NRFL is only going to make that even more highlighted and substantial, because what they don't have right now is a place to go play for a living. And there's a lot of other clubs out there or leagues out there. They are not professional. Don't be fooled. I have dug into every one of them. There's not one, there's like 4 or 5. None of them are professional level leagues that you can make a living at. And so right now they get to the college, maybe it pays for their education, and rugby gets them out of the trouble when they're young, gives them a purpose, gives them a family or a team to surround them and give them structure, which is phenomenal. And even then to the next level of college to get an education. But then what? Now, what do you do with all that skill, that passion, that ability? You go overseas, I guess, right? Or do something else for a living and play it part-time at some of these other leagues that are there now. The NRFL, you will be able to go on, and not just even as a player. I mean, there's so many, there's going to be the coaches, there's going to be the trainers, there's going to be the refs and the physicians and all the people involved that make these leagues happen. Many of them played, and a lot of them played all the way up through college in other sports. Like if you look at a football team, you look at a baseball team, you look at a basketball team, they usually grew up playing at some point. So all these kids being able to come up like your son in rugby, have that structure and that environment, which is only going to get bigger. And the NRFL is also funding, sponsoring, doing youth camps, bringing the kids into their combines, having events for the kids at the games and the events that they have at the league level. I mean, they're involving the kids all the way up through the whole thing as well. But then it gives them that ability to plug into the full professional league level, not just as a player. There's so many other roles they can still participate and be a part of that league. It's going to be thousands and thousands of opportunities. So I think it's something we desperately need right now. And I think some of the other sports are really struggling with it, and the kids are not being fooled. They realize, very few make it in those other ones. And this gives them an alternative, right? It gives them another place to go. And I think they're going to get caught up into what many of you have already said, the camaraderie, the gentleman type of atmosphere where people respect each other. They're in it as a team. They're not in it to be the show. And that goes so much farther than somebody who thinks and is arrogant enough to think I'm the superstar and I'm going to make the millions and it's all about me. That's not going to spread to the masses, right? That doesn't help most kids. That's a rare, unique skill set. But what rugby is, as the way it is designed by nature and the structure of it, as a team, they live and die. As a team and as a group, I just think that it's a totally different type of sport and league that our kids need. So go ahead, Earl.
Thanks.
Right. One of my attractions to be an investor is just that a path for young men and young ladies like your son's age, because the Olympics are coming up and we're hosting, the World Cup, I'm sorry, the Olympics was in my brain, World Cup is coming up. So there's a definite time. So part of the marketing plan that the National Rugby Football League has, where Kevin and I got to talk about the business model, which answers your question here, is that because it's a media and entertainment company, there are going to be 8 teams that are part of the league. And as we get the funding filled out, which, I can't talk much about that yet, but those 8 teams are going to be playing a rotation league, just like, in the old days, there's the Negro Baseball League, and these teams played rotations and they played games around the country where they could go to, but they played each other. And so to get exposure planting seeds, part of the business plan is to fund these first 8 teams, have a mini season going out to different cities, playing exhibition games, and generate up interest for more people to know that the sport exists, to have interest to maybe competing in the Olympics. And so theoretically, if one of these exhibition games was in an area and your son was there with you and you're interested, there'll be somebody that says, okay, here's the next steps to go through. So instead of trying to guess where do I need to go, the league, I believe, will be providing leads to interested athletes and parents about, okay, if you want to be in the National Rugby Football League, here's a proposed path to go. and now this has never been said, so this is just me, that next time I get to talk to him says, are you talking to colleges, universities to say, hey, have you thought about having rugby scholarships? Because we need to have people who can play in the Olympics. And we need a homegrown, we need that story of somebody like your son, whose dad's a rugby guy. He's in the clinics and he went through the whole process, and now look, he's on the team. And I believe that the National Rugby Football League will invest in helping the stories like that come true. So I think there's a path.
That's great.
And I want to be, kind of but this guy named Kevin Smith? I think if you talk to Kevin Smith, he may have some pull to help, your son be on the right path to get to the National Rugby Football League. I mean, he's
Forget
so
about my
passionate.
son. Do you think my son's dad can get a job as a podcaster with Danny somewhere for the football league,
Oh,
or sit next to the fields and commentate?
well, I know this guy named Earl,
Uh-huh.
and he's got an investment in a company called Tombo TV, and
Uh-huh.
they're for podcasters to have shows on Tombo TV. So there's a high probability we could work something out.
Okay, you listening, Danny?
There's a plug. There you are.
Tombo TV, there we go. Excellent.
Yeah, I'll just be the pretty face because Rifle is the one that knows everything.
Oh wait, I wasn't supposed to laugh. What? I wasn't supposed to laugh. Okay.
Yeah, cool.
But Rifle, did that kind of answer the question? I
Yes,
think
no, thank you. That's great. Just to know that there is, through this amazing game, more than just going to a field on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, playing a game on Saturday and coming home, because it encompasses so much more of life if you take advantage of the game and the team that the game is played with and the camaraderie that the game offers and things like that. It's not just a one-off. It's literally a part of life. It can really make something out of young boys and young girls who participate in this team sport, not doing it alone, but learning with and from other people and just becoming better as a group. So that's wonderful to hear that there's that vision for youngsters to be able to make it big, not necessarily running on the field with a rugby jersey on your back, but you can be a physiotherapist. You can be a doctor. You can be someone who's, helps people mentally with rugby, or look after the fields, or, there's so many avenues that the game opens. It's not just you have to play on a Saturday on the field. There are other ways that you can get involved in rugby and be part of this amazing game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow. It's amazing stuff. I am looking forward to attending an NRFL game when the league starts its play. So yeah, it's a very exciting time in the game of rugby here in America because and we've touched upon Kevin, you've touched upon it. There's other I guess you could call semi-pro leagues where the players do not make enough where they could play rugby full time. And again, with the leadership at the NRFL and their creativity, bringing in a media company, and really, because the one thing that in all sports leagues, what people don't realize is, and I'm sure you guys know this, is the majority of the money that's made in these pro leagues is not ticket sales. Ticket sales is probably the smallest portion of money that they make in the league. The biggest, probably 60-70% of the money that are made in these leagues is media. The media contracts to the different television, like ESPN, all the different sports stations, and all the media content that's created. That's where the majority of the money is made. So with the NFL really focusing on the media part, I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes out and rolls out. And me and Rifle are doing a very little part of that with this podcast. So we're trying to get the game of rugby to as many people as possible. So we're very excited about that.
Now, speaking of media entertainment, before we sign off here, I'd like to put in just to plant a seed in somebody's head is when something's starting to take effect when you see it in other sports. So one thing that is classic in rugby, when somebody scores a try, how they're going across the goal line, that slide that people do.
Mhm.
You know what I've seen? I've seen it in football. The athletes are starting to do that instead of doing the dance. Some of them are doing the rugby slide. And yesterday I saw it on a basketball court in a pro basketball game. Is that, and then there was another one I think you guys sent out where, the scrum showed up and they did the scrum to push everybody across the line. So you start seeing some of these little elements of rugby showing up in other sports in the professional level, it's on the way. And I think also if you guys, I know you've done it in other podcasts, but just tie it back to here why we are investors. Because we found out we didn't know that rugby was actually the foundation for a couple other sports that became big sports in America.
Right.
And so I think part of the education when that piece happens. So could you guys just for the podcast, please re-educate ourselves that rugby actually was the father and mother of what other sports here in the US that are big?
Well, I know the word touchdown in the NFL comes from the game of rugby. And it comes from the game of rugby because in the game of rugby, when you score a try, it's only official when the rugby player touches the ball to the ground. That's when the try becomes official.
Yep.
So that's where the word touchdown comes in the NFL, comes from the game of rugby.
Well, and the field goal came from there.
Yep.
Look at you spitting out all the rules and regulations of rugby, Danny, and
Hey,
now you didn't know what a try was.
you can't be the only one that looks smart here, right? Come on.
Good job. Wow, you got a
That's
great
something I
knowledge here.
learned.
That's good.
So yes, and actually, and we spoke about this in one of the episodes, the origins of rugby. The gentleman who is credited for creating rugby, legend says that they were playing a game of soccer. I think it was rifle. I think it was,
Correct, yeah.
and the
Before
gentleman
football,
just
yeah.
picked up the ball and started running with the ball, and some people started tackling him, and that's how rugby was pretty much created. Was
William
from a
Windhouse,
game
yeah.
of soccer or football for us,
Yeah.
for all you non-Americans.
Yeah.
So yes, rugby has many sports has its origins in rugby. Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming tonight and answering all our questions and all your knowledge and wisdom. And going back to the very, very beginning, I think Danny and I will both say thank you so much for standing on a stage. Thank you for going through those hard times, for not giving up, for absolutely biting the bullet and just doing everything you possibly could to where you are now. And both Danny and myself were sitting in a crowd listening to you guys on a stage teach about options and stocks and things like that. And here we are. That was 2017. So what, about almost 7-8 years later, here we are talking about rugby, but it's because you two guys didn't give up, and we are so grateful for that. And we honor you, and we are thankful for you, and know you're super busy. Thank you for taking your time and being on the podcast tonight with us. And Danny, thank you for putting this all together and doing such a wonderful thing. You're doing great, my friend. Thank you.
Yes, I feel the same sentiments. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight. We're honored to be here with you guys. And all the work that you're doing with the NRFL, and I'm truly looking forward to maybe doing a podcast during a game.
That would
A
be
live
cool.
podcast, that would be great. That would be great. So,
Yeah.
gentlemen, once again, thank you, everybody. The website is
You are
thenrfl.com, correct, Earl?
yeah, the NRFL.com. But
Okay.
if you're willing to, we'd love to be invited back because I'm sure we'll have updates in 6, 8 months. If you invite us back, we're happy to
Oh,
come
of
back.
course. So yeah, of course, without a doubt, we'll have you guys back, and it'll be our third time, technically, well, second time, technically, third time. We've been together, so but this time we have video and sound. I made sure of that.
And if anybody does want to know more about investing in the NRFL, you can obviously talk to them directly. You can also talk to Earl or myself and get access to our contact info at edgewater.education. And just schedule some time on our schedules to talk about it. And we're happy to share with you more about the opportunity. It's amazing, very exciting.
Wonderful.
Yes. So with that, we're going to end this episode, gentlemen. Thank you again. Appreciate it. And have a happy holidays and a happy new year. Enjoy with your families and your loved ones. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rifle. Thank you, Danny.
Very welcome. Thanks.
So with that, everyone, until next time, take care. Thank you for watching this episode of Rugby with Rifle. Remember to press the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet to support this podcast.